We're always hearing things like an AI is thinking or making a decision. It's just become part of how we talk. But what if that casual language is actually masking a huge, and I mean huge, debate? We're about to dive into a fascinating argument that says calling AI an agent isn't just wrong, it's a myth and a potentially dangerous one. So let's break it down. Yeah, this quote from Mandy Zofrau just cuts right to the heart of it. We use these very human, very loaded words for what machines are doing. We say an AI is seeing, but really, it's just identifying a specific value for a bunch of pixels. And look, this isn't just some harmless metaphor. It creates this false bridge in our minds between what a human experiences and what a machine is processing. And that bridge, it's built on some really faulty foundations. So that brings us to the big question, the central question for this whole explainer. When an AI acts, is it truly an agent? I mean, can you hold it morally responsible for what it does? To even begin to answer that, we first have to get really clear on what we mean by moral agency in the first place. All right, so what actually makes a moral agent? Before we can even start to talk about AI in these terms, we need a solid benchmark. And the most obvious place to start is with us, with humans. Okay, so philosophers have a name for this. They call it the standard view of moral agency. And basically, the core idea is this. A moral agent isn't just a thing that does stuff. It's a being that you can hold accountable for its actions. And as you'll see, that comes with a pretty demanding set of conditions. So, what are those conditions? Well, according to this standard view, there are 4 of them. You need rationality, you need free will, you need autonomy, and you need this thing called phenomenal consciousness, which is really just a fancy way of saying you have subjective internal experience. And get this, an entity has to tick every single one of these boxes to qualify. It's an incredibly high bar. Okay, so now that we have our benchmark, let's flip the coin. Let's start deconstructing the whole case for AI agency by looking at 4 major flaws in how we tend to think about it. Author Mandy Zafar points out 4 fundamental mistakes that people make in this whole debate. First, we create false analogies. Second, we use this misleading form of reductionism. Third, we completely ignore that all these concepts are interdependent. And finally, we ignore normativity, which is all about the role of values. Let's tackle that first one. Okay, mistake number 1, false analogies. This is probably the most common one. We use the exact same words like learns or decides for what humans and machines do, but those words mean completely, totally different things in each context. Just think about the word autonomous. We throw it around all the time for cars, right? But a system that's just following a very complex program is automatic. It's like a vending machine. You press a button, it follows a script. A human being, on the other hand, who acts based on their own reasons and self-determination, that's autonomous. When we mix these two up, we create a false equivalence that kind of elevates the machine while also cheapening what it means to be human. All right, on to mistake number 2, misleading reductionism. This one's a little more subtle. This is what happens when we take a really rich, complex, messy human concept like intention, and we boil it down to some super simplistic technical definition that a machine can meet. But in the process, we lose everything that made the original concept meaningful. And the cost of doing this? It's huge. When we reduce a concept like agency, we strip away all the important stuff like autonomy or real reasoning. For instance, we might say an AI has intention just because it's programmed to achieve a goal, but that completely erases the deliberation, the self-awareness, the why behind a real human intention. It's like we've explained it by, well, explaining it away. We've lost the whole point. Next up, mistake number 3, ignoring interdependence. You can't just treat these big concepts like rationality, responsibility, autonomy as if they're separate Lego blocks that you can just snap into a machine one by one. In reality, they're all part of this deeply interconnected web of meaning. They depend on each other. Philosophers have this great term for this context. They call it the social space of reasons. It means that our ability to act as agents is embedded in a shared culture, in social norms, in language, in a whole world of understanding. AI systems exist completely outside of that space. They process data, sure, but they don't participate in our shared world. So you can't just give responsibility to a machine that has no access to the very context that gives that word meaning. It just doesn't work. And that brings us to the fourth and final flaw, and this one really ties everything together. It's called ignoring normativity, and at its heart, it's the failure to see that human action isn't just about what we do, it's about what we should do. It's fundamentally about values. And this is maybe the most critical distinction of all. An AI operates on what's called instrumental rationality. You give it a goal, and it calculates the most efficient path to get there. It's all about the how. But we humans, we use what's called practical reasoning. We take a step back and ask, why? And should I? We question whether the goal itself is good or right or just. To mistake an AI's cold calculation for our kind of value-based reasoning is to miss the entire point. It's the root of the whole myth. So, let's pull all this together. After looking at these flaws, why does this whole idea of AI agency ultimately fail? What's the final verdict here? When you lay it all out, the conclusion is, well, it's pretty direct and unambiguous. AI systems are not and cannot be moral agents. It's not that they just fall a little bit short. They fail to meet the absolute most basic, fundamental requirements. This isn't a difference of degree, it's a difference of kind. It's not that they're just not good enough yet. It's that they are a completely different kind of thing. Just look at this table. It really lays out the massive conceptual chasm between a human agent and an AI system. At every single level, from where the action comes from, to the type of reasoning it uses, to how it understands the world, the two are fundamentally different. Which is why that last row, responsibility, can only ever apply to one of them. And this isn't some tech gap we can just, patch with a software update. This is a basic difference in what we are. And this quote from Zafar just sums up the whole argument perfectly. You simply can't separate human action from values. Our actions are always embedded in a world of shoulds and should-nots. So to be a human agent who acts is to be a moral agent. They are one and the same. Agency itself is a moral concept. So, if agent is the wrong word, if it's so misleading, what should we be using instead? Let's talk about a new concept, a proposed solution that offers a much clearer path forward. The author proposes a much better term, AI Automated Performance, or AIP for short. And honestly, this is a brilliant linguistic move. It deliberately shifts the focus away from that loaded, misleading, human-like term agency and puts it squarely on what the system is actually doing. Executing an automated performance. It's a precise, accurate description of the AI's output without loading it up with all that philosophical baggage of will and intention and responsibility. And the benefits of thinking this way? They're huge. This term, AIAP, avoids all that confusion. It gets rid of the false comparisons to people. It's technically more accurate. But the absolute biggest win here? It keeps responsibility right where it belongs, with the human beings who create and use the technology. It's just a more precise and, frankly, more honest way to talk about AI. All right, so let's get to the bottom line. You might be thinking, this is all just a debate about words, right? Semantics. But the words we choose have profound, real-world consequences. Let's talk about why our words matter so much. And this is it. This is the ultimate takeaway. This is why getting the language right is so critical. When we casually talk about an AI as an agent, we create this subtle but incredibly dangerous illusion, the idea that we can outsource our own responsibility to a program. What happens is we create this responsibility gap where no one is actually accountable, not the programmer, not the company, not the user, because we've all implicitly pointed the finger at the agent. Using precise language, like AIAP, is a constant reminder that technology is a tool. It performs. The moral choice, the responsibility, that always comes back to a person. And so we end with this really practical and, frankly, urgent challenge. If the AI isn't an agent, if we can't blame the machine, then who is responsible for what it does? The person who wrote the code? The company that deployed it? The person who used it? By clearing away the fog of the moral agent myth, we are forced to stare directly at the real, vital, and complex questions of human accountability. And getting that right, that's a conversation we all need to be having right now.